Nice.
Bet.
So you really want me to start it?
Following you. I'm following you.
Okay.
Tell us where you are, Lynnette. Where are you right now?
Well, right now I am in the Joyce Athletic Center, better known as the Jack. I am toggling between, I was at cheer practice because I'm one of the leprechauns, and now I'm doing this, and then I'll go back, and then we have leprechaun tryout things later. So,
That's right.
big days, big days.
Later today?
What?
Later today, you have the tryouts for the
Well,
next batch?
The way the trials are working this year, basically I have my interview. Usually it would all be in one day, but with COVID, some of it has to be on Zoom. So my Zoom portion is today.
Oh, cool.
But I'm already the leprechaun, so I'm just trying out again for this year.
You got
But more or less, I mean, it'll be okay. It'll be good. It'll be good. Yeah, but hi everybody. I guess I'm starting off today. So welcome back to Black at ND, and we're gonna be continuing our Black Dumber series based on the book of the same title. And today with us we have Corey Robinson and Manny Grace, but obviously I have to introduce my co-hosts. Emorja, what's up?
What's up?
And James, how we feeling?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm so enjoying this series, especially Black Domers, and I'm thankful for you, Lynnette, and you, Emorja, for having me join you. This is a wonderful project that you're taking on, and I can't talk about it enough, so thank you.
Listen, I appreciate you because it's honestly because of you that I have gotten to meet some of these people because I've had no kinds of ties with them. So I appreciate you for being the bridge. It means a lot.
Absolutely, sir.
Yes, I totally feel that. All right, so let's just jump right into it. So, Manny, you're up first. So, if you could take yourself back kind of to when you graduated and when you were here at Notre Dame in the 70s, how do you describe your time? Kind of just take us through what it was like here on campus.
Well, the 70s were an interesting time to be at Notre Dame. As you recall, I started in mid-70s, started in fall of 75. I graduated in 79, spring of 79. And at that time, we were still going through the growing pains of having women at Notre Dame. So the first graduating class started in 72 and graduated 4 years after that, although there had been a few before that. There were very few black students on campus and even fewer black female students on campus. So social interactions were interesting, to say the least, that kind of a situation. But I found Notre Dame to be a really magical place. I had a great time. I found that you could really reinvent yourself at Notre Dame because nobody knew you there. You were brand new. Your parents weren't around. My only issue was my older brother was there when I was there. He was a senior class president, Augie Grace, and he was even in the same dorm I was in. So I had that one linchpin that kept me grounded.
What dorm was that, Manny?
Excuse me?
What dorm was that? Where'd you live?
We were in Kavanaugh Hall. Yes, Kavanaugh Hall at one time was a male dorm.
Right, I lived there too.
Yes. So it was an interesting time to be there, and I think because there were so few black students, the black students all knew each other. We were a very close-knit group. We didn't always get along together. I mean, there were lots of times that there were, fights just going on amongst the black students. There seemed to be a schism between the northern blacks and the southern blacks.
Wow.
For whatever reason you could ever imagine, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of interesting stuff too. If you tended to be a black student on campus, and if you were socializing a lot with white students, you were kind of socially ostracized too by the black community. And because they felt you really should stay in that group. And I tend to have a lot of friends who weren't black students, and so sometimes, I was sometimes on the outside looking in when it came to the black community at Notre Dame too.
Mr. Manny, you said something which is interesting about the students who were from the black students who were from the South versus the ones who are from the North, and it's interesting because I can see why that would happen. You have these black students who are raised in the South with certain traditions, and then you have some in the north who are raised with certain traditions, and so you all migrate to this one place in the Midwest, and it's like a melting pot of different experiences. So where you would expect all black people to be the same, as some people may think, every black person's experience is not the same. There's like a spectrum to the black experience.
Exactly.
And I wonder, even like manners, whenever I moved up here, I noticed a lot of people didn't really say good morning. I can see them for the first time and they go straight to business. I'm like, well, can you say hey first? So speak. If that's also something that some people from the South have ran into. Just like the whole conversation with soda versus pop, grits versus having sugar or salt and grits. It's always those things where we're always comparing. So it's funny to mention that.
Yeah, and I noticed that mostly with food too. A lot of the Southern black students would get together around commonality around certain foods, and they would cook together in their dorms, and that would also reinforce that close knit. And if you happen to be from Massachusetts, like I was, I'd never had chitlin before. I didn't know what it was. I didn't enjoy it. There are differences, yes.
Nice.
Yeah, and Corey, I'm gonna ask you, brother. So you had a unique experience as a student and an athlete. So can you sort of put that into perspective? Like, how would you describe your time at Notre Dame from both perspectives?
First and foremost, good evening, everyone. I don't want to offend Emorja. Is everyone doing okay? Good evening. Hello.
Doing great.
I thought that was really funny, Manny, because I'm from the South. I'm from Texas, and it's when I came to New York. I live in the city now. I live in New York City, and people don't hold doors open. Like one time, I held a door open for someone, and they got offended. They're like, "I can open the door myself. Thank you very much."
Wow.
And I was like, "Dang, it's a little different from down south." So I get it. But yeah, Emorja, it's strange because if you ask a lot of athletes, at least from my friend group in athletes, when I was there from, 2013 to 2017. I was an early enrollee, so I graduated high school in December, and I enrolled in January. So my class was 13 people. I came in, and I think there was 13 of us, and then 6 of us were football guys. So like, my orientation was literally 13 people in the top of South Dining Hall, and I got there in the middle of winter. I'd never seen snow. Like I never lived in snow before.
Yeah.
So my introduction to Notre Dame was like 5 a.m. workouts, training table, and like basically just like never leaving the Goog and never leaving study hall.
Yeah.
And I have 6 friends. So I guess it was a unique scenario because by the time Frost Show or freshman orientation, which I guess now is welcome weekend, by the time that rolled around, I felt like a sophomore. I already been on campus for a year, so all the freshmen coming in, I was helping run Frost Show for my dorm. So that in that sense it was strange because I was in between the years.
Yeah.
And then becoming a student athlete, it was strange because we just wore sweats all the time because we were always tired and we were always working out. So, but my friends who were also on the team who were white or Hispanic, they would go to class and then no one would want to be in group projects with them, or people didn't think they were smart because they were wearing issue gear. Yeah. So for us, we were like, dang, we're getting discriminated against because we're athletes. No one thinks we're smart. People think we just got here because I could run fast. So it was never like an issue of like, oh, I'm black here. It was more like, dang, like I got to show people that I'm smart because everyone sees my sweats and just automatically writes me off. And it was colorblind. So that was really interesting to me. So that was like my big battle. So I had to learn really early. You don't wear sweats to class, or else the professors don't give you, the type of respect, or you have to make an extra effort to go to office hours and just introduce yourself and say, hey, look, I know I'm a football guy, and I may actually, be traveling every weekend. I know I have practice from 3 to 7 every day, but I take your class seriously and I want to learn. So I just want to introduce myself, say hello. Those were the kind of battles that we had to face.
Oh man, and it's funny you say that because I've seen that in undergrad. People just come to class, wearing sweats. It's whatever. But I wonder if that also played upon everybody. Did that same idea of being lazy? Did every person get that stereotype? Was it just the black students?
No, it was everybody. Like I had a lot of friends who like some of my really good friends were white, and we would all roll into class together right after like a 7 a.m. lift.
Yeah. And
everyone was like, oh yeah, like those are the football guys, they're all dumb. So it did not matter, black, Hispanic, white did not matter. If you were a football guy and you wore sweats to class, people were just like, oh, dang, I got to have a group project with that guy. That was my personal experience. I don't know if it's changed in the past 6 years or whatever, but it was crazy to me. Yeah. So when other students were like, oh, it's hard for me to be black here, I never really understood that because, like, you know, being a black student athlete where, you know, you play football, it's a little different. You're not really like, there's that one, I remember watched the Charles Barkley, he was on Inside the NBA and TNT, and he was referencing Spike Lee's movie, Do the Right Thing. And there's that scene, you know, where he's talking about, like, you know, to the Italian guy, Spike Lee's talking to the Italian guy, and he says, you know, who's your favorite musician? And he's like, oh, Michael Jackson. Who's your favorite basketball player? Magic Johnson, like, or Michael Jordan. Like, those guys are black. And they're like, oh, he's not actually black. And it's like, well, yeah, they're black. That was kind of like a similar experience of being, like, black on campus, where everyone was like, oh, I watch you every Saturday, or your fans come up. But it's not like you're, like, people don't see you as black. They see you as other. They see you as an entertainer. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Entertainer. Man, and that's, yeah, that's true.
That is absolutely true.
We actually had the conversation a couple shows ago about,
like, recalling, yeah,
about being black on campus, you know, a regular student versus a student athlete, and to this day, I'll walk around town, and if people found out that I'm alum, one of the first questions they ask is, "Did you play sports there?" And I think it's my life's goal to kind of dispense that notion that you don't have to be an athlete to be a black student at Notre Dame. You know, it's not necessarily the case. I think a lot of people think that is the case, and whatever I could do to kind of dispel that myth, I'm going to try to do before I leave this earth.
It's funny
because we on the other side are trying to, like, dispel the myth that black student athletes are dumb. So, you know, so it's like you're talking about the same thing from just different sides.
Right. You got that right.
It's really fascinating. It's like, if I go into a class and I'm on Dean's list, you know, I'm like, look, I'm not just here because I'm a student athlete. Like, yeah, I can play football, but I can compete here too. You know, look at my GPA. But it's funny how that always works. It's like everyone's always fighting, but sometimes we're fighting for the same thing.
Yeah, I think Mr. Manny, do you want to say something?
I was going to say, it's funny how things haven't changed, James, because even when I was there back in the 70s, same thing happened. When people would see black students on campus, if you happen to be tall or if you happen to just look athletic or something, people just assumed that you were an athlete and would ask you immediately, what sport do you play? And I don't know how many times people ask me that, and I am probably the least athletic person on this call today.
You know, Matt, you said since you talked about being on campus, and I think there's a myth out there, but I know it's true, that you were the first black Irish guard at Notre Dame with your time here. Can you take us back to that time period and you know, marching into the stadium for the first time ever? How were you received as the first black Irish guard?
You know, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, indeed, I am the first black Irish Guard member. I was an Irish Guard member in 1978 and 1979. Right. Prior to that, I was in the band and we used to have what we call the rolling timpani, or the thunder drums, and I was the person who pulled the thunder drums for a guy named Kevin Pritchett, who was the drummer. And it was a high-profile position, and I liked that fact of being a high-profile position. You were out in front of the drum line, you were out in front of the band. And when I was there, I kept looking at the Irish Guard thinking, man, those guys are so cool. You know, they're 6'2", they're imposing. They wore this really impressive uniform, and I wanted desperately to be part of that. So I auditioned. And that's when I found out that Notre Dame had never had a black Irish Guard member before. And I wasn't sure if I was going to get selected. It was a tough thing. First of all, there were 20 people who were auditioning for 3 roles, because at that time, any Irish Guard member who was in the Guard previously stayed in the Guard until they graduated, so there were only 3 openings. And I was auditioning for one of those openings, but like I said, they never had a black Guard member before, and I know the band directors were a little concerned about it, and they even talked to me before the auditions and said, look, I understand you're trying out for the Guard. Do you realize that you may be the only black Guard member we've ever had? Have you thought about what it would be like? What if your other Guard members don't like you, don't want a black Guard member? What if some people because you know how Notre Dame is so full of tradition and everything. People might just think, like having a black leprechaun or a female leprechaun. There are going to be people who are going to sit there and say, Lynnette knows what I'm talking about. There are going to be people who are sit there going to say, this is not tradition, this is not Notre Dame. But I never had a problem with any of the Guard members, and the fact that the students, I thought, really embraced me. I had a really great experience as being in the Guard. There were some black students who questioned the whole idea about wearing a Scottish kilt and being in the Irish Guard, and why are you doing this? What does it have to do with your culture? What are you trying to prove? That kind of thing. And I got that mostly from black students more than I got it from white students. But I thought the student body embraced it very, very well, and I had a wonderful time as a Guard member, and it's some of the fondest memories I ever had. I know all the secret Guard traditions and protocols, which I will take to my grave and not tell other people about them.
Mr. Manny, there is I remember reading your story, and I'm going to read a line from your story that I want you to talk about.
Sure.
It says, or your truth, excuse me. It says, so my roommates and I turned to a low-tech but time-tested solution to the height problem. We stuffed athletic socks into my sneakers, and I joined the line of newbies hoping to be chosen.
Yes. At that time, the Guard was different than it is right now. At that time, you had to be 6'2" or above. Generally, most of the Guard members were ROTC cadets, people who were already in the military branches in the ROTC program, or were phenomenal marchers. They were not necessarily band people, and there was always this really separation between the Guard and the band. And I think at that time, I was short. I was not 6'2". I was only 6'1" on a good day. And so I didn't want that to be the reason I was excluded. So yes, I stooped to subterfuge and stuck athletic socks into my shoes, and tried to stand as tall as possible during the Guard inspection.
That is amazing. Yeah, and I definitely, you already said it, Manny, I went through a very similar thing, becoming the first female leprechaun. They asked me pretty much the same question, do I understand the gravity of what I was about to do being the first female, and second, we didn't know that Sam was going to be the second/third black leprechaun, and I always kind of just thought about it like, well, I want to do this, and I think that I will represent Notre Dame well, and as long as you guys are okay with it, I'm okay with it, and I'm ready for whatever backlash I get. And I think I totally echo what you said. The student body really, and fans rallied around me. I got little to no hate or anything like that, which I think was exciting. So I'm glad to hear that you, as someone else who kind of did a first, had a positive experience. But I want to kind of also ask you both, Corey and Manny, how would you say, and Manny, you kind of touched on this a little, how would you say that the things you went through at Notre Dame, both of you having a pretty unique experience, how did that kind of prepare you for the real world and the rest of your life post-graduation?
Okay, I'll start off. When I went to Notre Dame, I knew I was kind of narrowly focused. I knew I wanted to be an attorney. So I went there and I said, okay, what subject matter what major can I major in that will get me my best grades? Because I knew I needed good grades to get into the law school I wanted to get into. I became a psychology major. I'm not throwing any shade on psychology or anything, but it just happened to be what resonated with me. I did really well, and I graduated, and I went on to Columbia Law School, and then went on to practice law in New York. Now I'm an associate general counsel at the Walt Disney Company here in beautiful downtown Burbank, California. I think that being at Notre Dame, putting yourself through the boot camp experience of being all alone, doing things on your own, taking care of yourself, and trying to be the best student you could be, helped me going into law school. And I didn't feel that I was inferior to any of my law school fellow students, not just because I came from Notre Dame. A lot of the students at my law school were Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia undergrads. There were a few Duke people, as I recall, too, but they tend to be very New York centric or East Coast centric people. But I didn't feel inferior in any way because I knew that I put in the time at Notre Dame, and I wasn't probably the top of my class at Notre Dame, but it didn't matter. And I found that I could do all the work that other people could do at law school, and that I could excel just like everybody else did. So I think what Notre Dame did is it kind of made you a man or make you a woman by throwing you in there and making you take care of yourself and do what you had to do to reach your goal. And it was a transformative experience for me. I really had a great time at Notre Dame, and I think it really prepared me well for both law school as well as practicing law.
Wow, yeah, I mean that's amazing. I'm definitely not at Walt Disney. Like I was never. I don't think they'd even be smart enough. Like I don't know if I'm smart enough to do that, but I was a PLS major in college, so I basically, that stands for Program of Liberal Studies. It's a very tiny major, and I was one of those kids who had a circuitous route to where I am. So even when I got to college, you know, like I said, I graduated high school early, and then I was like, okay, I want to be a finance major. Then I was like, ooh, finance is really hard. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to be, you know, a psychology major. I met with the aquatic biology department. I met with the medieval studies and Irish studies department. I had meetings with literally every single department on campus, and I changed my major maybe 6 or 7 times. And then it got to the point where my dean was like, look, Corey, you've changed your major from film to philosophy to art to like medieval studies. Just do PLS. You can study everything. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that was an option. So I did PLS, and I started studying math and science and history and philosophy and literature. I just got into everything. I studied opera, and that's when my education took off. What?
Study my stuff, opera?
Opera, yeah. I studied opera, man.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, don't worry. Continue.
Yeah. Don Giovanni, man. That's the opera that changed my life. I was like, Don Giovanni.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was studying everything, and it was so exciting. Like, learning was fun. And I didn't know if I could ever say that before. I didn't know if, like, school was fun. And it got to the point where I stopped, like, worrying about grades and stopped worrying about path. I just started worrying about, like, what is interesting. And that shift in mindset from I got to get an A or I got to ace this test or I'm going to cram to do well on this test versus I actually want to read 200 pages of Nietzsche and talk about it. Like I actually want to get coffee and talk about Immanuel Kant. Like when I actually got to that level of like, this is just fun and I want to do this in my free time, then everything changed and then the world opened up to me. So when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was thinking ACE. I was thinking maybe go to Google. I was thinking maybe go into finance. And then I got an opportunity to go into art dealing. And I flew to New York and I was an intern at an art gallery. And then I worked for Sotheby's, the auction house, for 2 years, doing the business development for them. And then now I'm in NBC Sports doing sports television. I'm now a reporter doing like esports to basketball to like football, a little bit of everything. But what it really taught me is that you don't have to have a plan. As long as you're equipped with curiosity and hard work, like you could be dropped in anywhere. There was even at one point in my college experience where I found myself for 6 weeks in Uganda, living with priests, teaching like art and English and coaching basketball at like a secondary school. Like, and it was like I've never even imagined myself to be in this situation. I could never imagine myself to be here again. But it was amazing to have that opportunity and learn something from it. So that was like my big takeaway is if you can get past the whole I have to do this to get there. Mm-hmm. And you can just enjoy the process. You're going to have a blast, and you're going to find yourself doing crazy stuff that you could have never even planned.
True. That is so true. That's a word by itself.
That's right. It's interesting. Just the whole Notre Dame experience as an undergrad is, it's an institution. It's an experience going there, living in the dorms, just experiencing what life is like. And I always tell current students like yourself, Lynnette, that the only thing that I regret about Notre Dame is that I'm not a current student right now because I had such a great time. And as I think of your experience, Lynnette, what you're going through I think we're kind of living vicariously through you as an undergrad. So if you were to kind of, reach back and talk to some Black high school students who are thinking about Notre Dame, is there any piece of or words of advice that you would give them at this point?
Um, that's a hard question. I would say the number one thing that I would advise Black students in high school is to not be afraid of a diversity percentage, and to not be afraid that, coming to Notre Dame, you can look at the numbers, they're not very high for a percentage of Black students. And I came from a predominantly white high school, so that didn't scare me as much, but I knew that coming here, coming to somewhere that I was like a little afraid of, that I'd have to fall back into just like having the same, how you have to put on a white personality. Sometimes we've all done it. I was afraid that I'd fall into that like habit, but coming here, I found there is such a strong Black community here, especially at Notre Dame, that I didn't have to pretend to be anybody that I wasn't. And I would say that to all high school kids, if you're looking at a college, academics are important, but definitely look at the social aspects and try to talk to someone that has lived it, and try to reach out. People on Instagram, I've had people DM me on Instagram and ask what Notre Dame is really like, and I don't be afraid to do that kind of stuff, because I think that it gives you a lot of information that you're not going to get in the pamphlets, and you're not going to find through diversity numbers. So that was like a lot of advice in one, but definitely ask questions, be curious, and do your own research would be my number one thing.
I agree with Lynnette, and I think it's got to be really difficult in this day of COVID-19, because I think you really get a better impression of school when you actually go on campus and you get a chance to walk around, see what it's like, sit in on classes, see what the social interaction's like. I don't know how you do that now as a graduating senior who's applying to colleges, when all the colleges have shut down, spring visitations, or only have, virtual tours of campus. It's going to be really hard to try to get a good feeling of what it's like to be a Black student, for example, at a college right now.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm saying this because my daughter is a senior and is applying to Notre Dame, mind you.
Let's go. Let's go.
Be better or else. but she's going to that right now. Because she had a whole trip planned as a junior to go visit a bunch of these schools. It was a school sponsored trip, and they were flying them to the East Coast, and they were taking a bus ride up and down the East Coast looking at schools, and that got canceled last spring with COVID-19. So she has not set foot on, I would say, 80% of the colleges that she's applying to.
Wow.
Maybe 90%. And it's got to be a hard decision to make now.
Is there any way that we can keep her away from USC? Hopefully she's not applying to USC. Is that...
Oh, don't worry. I trained her well. She is not applying to USC.
Oh, my goodness. And it's funny. So I'm going to I'm going to take some different direction. So I got to Notre Dame in 2015, and I noticed, people were talking about who this one particular person was on campus, and I remember I was walking into the Fortune, and they were just like randomly taking pictures. I went to the Black crowd where I know my folks. They were the undergrads. And I went over there and they said, who are they taking pictures of? And they said, they're taking pictures of, so-and-so. So I went over there, I said, I'm going to play like I'm trying to be in the picture. I'm just sort of back up a little bit. And the interesting thing about it, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine, and he was like, he said, I see, I was looking at Sports Illustrated, and I see that there was a picture of you in there.
That's so cool.
So how do you? I said, how would you even see this? And he said, well, I went online, I saw it. So,
oh my gosh!
Wow.
That is
That's crazy.
so crazy.
And Sports Illustrated.
Right, and then my caption, of course, we had this discussion a couple weeks ago. Well, for all those people who were asking me about being a football player, I said I had to show the. Have you ever seen this before?
Yeah, I've seen the photo before, but I never knew that was you.
Exactly.
Certainly is him. Wow.
That's amazing.
Wild.
Yeah. Wow.
Corey, are you still riding a skateboard?
No, believe me, no way.
You know, I do health and safety and product safety liability law. Skateboards is the worst thing you could possibly get on. Maybe e-scooters would be worse, but.
But you know what, you all, I appreciate you so much, for joining us for this podcast, and prayerfully this show will go on to even higher levels, because a lot of people need to know who you are. A lot of people need to know those who came in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and those who paved the way for us today, because we stand on your shoulders. So, Mr. Manny Grace, thank you so much for your contribution to our campus, because
Well, you make me sound so old when you say even back in the 70s. Thanks, Emorja. Thank you.
I wish I was in the 70s, because I love the pros. Like, I know it's coming back. But yeah, so thank you all so much. And listen, everybody, for those who are watching, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at black_@ND, and on Facebook, black@ND. All right? Thank you so much. You all have a good one.